Hi everyone, it's Willow from OutCenter, and you're watching a video in our series about a protocol for an inclusive future. And today we're talking about the rising issue of Christian nationalism. We face growing threats from an overlapping trio of worldviews, including Christian nationalism. But we believe that there is a better path forward found in inclusive communities, gender liberation and equality, and intersectionality. These principles offer a roadmap to a world where everyone can thrive. Learn more and get resources to be an advocate at outcenter.org/protocol. So then let's talk about Christian nationalism. And let's start with some definitions first. And first, let me just start off by saying Christianity is not the same thing as Christian nationalism. And in our case, we are talking specifically about American Christian nationalism. So Christianity is a global faith originating in Southwest Asia and North Africa, whereas American Christian nationalism is a partisan political ideology reflecting a narrow interpretation of religious values. According to sociologists of religion, Whitehead and Perry, Christian nationalism is a cultural framework that idealizes and advocates for a fusion of Christian and American identities, the belief that the United States is and should be a Christian nation. While Christianity, as many ancient religions did, began as a small offshoot sect drawing from various movements and practices from Judaism, Egyptian Gnosticism, and Greek philosophy, it unfortunately quickly evolved to become a political force with Emperor Constantine's merging of religion and state in the 4th century. Nationalism and Christianity were bedfellows from early on. Now let's think into more closer history related to the United States. In the 15th century, the Catholic papacy promulgated the doctrine of discovery, a legal and religious justification that permitted European Christian nations to claim lands and subjugate non-Christian indigenous peoples. Moving ahead, we have to talk about manifest destiny, a 19th century belief that informed public policy that the United States was divinely ordained to expand westward across the North American continent, from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, and trampling over everybody and everything, all in the name of God. This deeply ingrained and spiritual mixture leads us to today in modern American Christian nationalism. In the 20th century, evangelicals were harnessed and fomented into a voting bloc, centering a rugged, militant, and patriarchal vision of faith, modeled after John Wayne rather than Jesus. See Kristen Kobes-Dumay's work, Jesus and John Wayne, for more about that. Various issues got generated to make evangelicals angry and vote for favored candidates, from abortion to family values, discourse about the culture wars, and what I like to call left-behind theology. With Roman Catholicism as the exception, most conservative Christian groups didn't really care about pro-life issues until Roe v. Wade, when it became a political issue. Family values is, of course, a euphemism for patriarchal worldviews, anti-feminism, and, of course, anti-LGBTQ sentiment. Culture wars are about manufacturing what's sometimes called an industrial persecution complex, where conservative Christians are made to feel like they're being sidelined in the name of diversity and multiculturalism. As they say, when you are accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. Dispensationalism, or left-behind theology, drawn from the fictional books introduced in the 90s about this theological topic, teaches that Americans need to set the world stage, by force if necessary, to prepare for Jesus's literal physical return and reign on earth. This has led Christians to support genocide, conflict, and policies like Project 2025. And what are all the results of this Christian nationalism kind of thinking? In today's era, that's why we see anti-choice rhetoric, anti-LGBTQ legislation, book bans and battles in schools, and executive orders that favor Christian nationalism. But what does all of this mean? What do we take from this? How do we use it? Well, first, let's start with our takeaways. So first, from an ethical perspective, we need to understand that these things are grounded in issues ranging from xenophobia to ethnic supremacy. These aren't perspectives that are open, affirming, or forward-focused thinking. Such views have proven to bring about intolerance and not safety and improvements for all people in society. From a health and medical perspective, Christian nationalism makes totally false claims about the nature of sexuality and gender. For example, they quote the Bible very literally and say things like, God made people male and female, which is simply not scientifically accurate. I guess they've never heard of intersex people. And from a theological perspective, many progressive Christians have examined and critiqued morally objectionable teachings within the Christian tradition in Scripture and have come out the other side with an impressive library of spiritual messages that have informed some of the greatest activists of our time, from MLK Jr. to Dorothy Day to Reverend William J. Barber. You can have Jesus in church and leave out the homophobia if you want. Okay, now that we have some background on Christian nationalism, let's talk about how we can take this knowledge, how we can identify negative forces in our cities and school boards and public offices, and how we can make an impact to build inclusive communities. So for everyone, first, and I say this in almost all of these videos, first, educate yourself and others. You need to learn to recognize the discourse of Christian nationalism. You need to understand what it looks like, how it appears, and really its end goals as well. Next, you need to stand up for and champion religious freedom. That means religious freedom for everybody. Christianity has often had a privileged place in our public offices and civil service and some of the liturgies of how we do government. But the reality is, not everybody's a Christian, and not everybody comes from that same set of worldviews. So you can do your part to make sure that other people get a voice as well. For example, you might be aware that many public meetings have begin with an invocation. Often this is led by a Christian pastor, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if it's only that kind of voice with that kind of perspective, it doesn't really make other people from other perspectives or other faiths feel welcome. What can you do to create space just for those types of things that help stop the Overton window from shifting to total Christian supremacy? And lastly, I know you've heard this one before, but it's so important to show up locally. Don't let the rhetoric of Christian nationalism slide in school board meetings and city commission meetings, from the messages you hear from a state rep or senator, right? Have conversations, call it out, talk to your friends, support other people who are running for office against those voices, or maybe even for yourself. Think about running for office and make sure that you are running on a platform that's inclusive of everyone, right? People of different faiths, LGBT people, trans kids and their civil rights. Maybe it's your calling to step up and fill the spot of somebody who would rather have a much more closed off society. I want to give some special calls to action for progressive people of faith here too. I would say 3 things: reclaim your theology, be a visible safe haven, and challenge bigotry from within. You've probably already done the work to realize what the problematic things are and how you are representing something that is totally different and open and welcoming and that's focused on the good of human beings. But that means that requires work, right? Reclaiming theology is more than just, not saying homophobic things from the pulpit. It's also living out that theology, right? How much are the poor being served? And the poor is not just folks who need food, but it's also people who are being trampled on by Christian nationalist policies. Theology is not just a book study, it's also a way of being. So reclaim it and stand against Christian nationalism's set of practices. When I say be a visible safe haven, I mean that visibility is so important. As we've mentioned before, we have to draw the line and not let that Overton window keep going over to this extremist direction. One of the ways that we can do that is putting things like Christianity and pride together. I love it when I see churches with big progress flags next to a cross. It's showing Christian nationalists that you don't have to make faith all about exclusion. It could be on a church website, putting pronouns next to pastors' names and things like that. It could be having special LGBT groups at a church, whether that's for Bible reading or prayer groups or small groups or life groups or anything like that. Become visible, show people, not just tell them, show them that you are a safe space and that you are not on the side of Christian nationalism. Finally, challenge bigotry from within. To be inside a Christian space that comes with this sort of historic territory that has not always been inclusive of LGBT people, and that history lives on even within progressive Christian institutions. Use your power, use your position, use your theological knowledge, and make sure that Christian nationalism isn't starting to sprout up in different places. Whether that's through denominational leadership or through being a lay member of a local church's board, there's so many opportunities to make sure that folks feel welcome. If you can, implement policies that allow for gender inclusive restrooms, right? Make sure that there are spaces for people to feel comfortable in their LGBT identity. Like I said, maybe it's a matter of connecting this to that visible, safe haven way of thinking. What can you do to show your neighborhood, to show your denomination, to show your members that you are not going to stand for a Christian nationalism? And we'll talk about this in a later video, but we understand that in some ways the opposite of Christian nationalism is building inclusive communities. Really, progressive people of faith, you already have communities. You can be really a prototype for what the world can look like when we're not using faith as a cudgel for bigotry. I'm excited for the day that inclusion and people of faith are almost synonymous. Well, I think that about does it for our introduction about the background and history and the thinking of Christian nationalism, so that way you can better identify it and stand against it. If you want other people to be educated about these same topics, please share this video on social media or via email, or tell your friends about it in real life. Write down the website address, or just tell them to go to outcenter.org/protocol for all of our resources. And if you want to keep these videos going, give us a gift at outcenter.org/donate.